I wonder if you join me in welcoming the Karim Benzema of Beacon Church, the one and only Matt Booth.
Wow. Well, what an introduction. Since Adrian introduced me as the Karim Benzema of the Beacon Church, I've struggled to get actually on the field of football. Largely my own fault because I don't look anything like him. I'm not in the physical condition required to be the Karim Benzema anymore. But one day I will get back on that pitch and we'll be playing. But hey, good morning. As Adrian said, my name is Matt. It's really good to be with you here today. And for those of you who don't know me, as Adrian said, I've been coming to the Beacon Church for about 16 years now. It's been my home church for a long, long time. I've only been to 2 churches, and I've pretty much spent equal time in each, but here is my home, and I love it. As Adrian mentioned, I am a facilities manager and look after a couple of buildings in London, one of them being the National Archives. But this week has been a very different week for me. This is my... Oh, I better turn this on. God. There we go. This is my wife, Susie. She's here in the front row this morning, but 9 days ago, Susie had an operation on her knee. It was a planned operation. She injured herself a few years ago, and she took the opportunity to get the surgery done. And this week, I've been doing my best to look after her. I've not done a fantastic job all the time, but I've done my best to look after her. It's been a joy and a privilege. It's also a joy and a privilege to look after Grace this week. She's my daughter. And you might have seen her running around church, normally in pretty dresses, but when Daddy's in charge, it's tracksuit, it's Air Force Ones, and that's what we do. As I said, it's been different for me this week. Normally, in the building that I manage, me and my team, one of our responsibilities is controlling really complicated heating and ventilation systems to make sure that these one-of-a-kind original historical documentation stays at the exact right temperature and humidity to make sure that they don't perish or get damaged. This week, I've had to make sure that Susie's tea is exactly the right temperature for drinking. If anyone's ever made a cup of tea for Susie, you will know it will get sat and neglected for 20 minutes before she even thinks about drinking it because it's way too hot. And her ice packs as well for her knee, they've had to be the exact right temperature so they're not misshapen and not too cold for her knee. As I said, quite challenging. It's been a real privilege, and actually doing that, I've learned that things need to be done in a certain way, and I've been serving my family, and it's given me some real insight into the stuff I want to talk about today. I've titled this sermon, The Suffering Servant. And obviously I am joking, it's been a real privilege to be at home with both my girls this week, and they've made it so fun and enjoyable for me. But all of that said, that is the topic of what I want to talk about this morning. And as we continue our series in Isaiah, we're looking at the future hope. And I've been blown away so far by the teaching we've had. Steve, Drew, Abe, they did fantastic jobs this morning. But, I'm not surprised. When you open the Word of God, and as Abe said last week, and faithfully teach it, there's real power there. And that's what I want to do this morning. I want to open the Word of God and see the power that's able to change us and challenge us. The book of Isaiah is so pivotal to the Christian faith. Drew unpacked some of the parallels between the book of Isaiah and the Bible as a whole. I'm not going to go over that again. But one of our objectives in this series is to help you guys get a real excitement for the Word of God, to be curious about what's been said on the stage and go away and read some more for yourself. And I want to try and get that across to you today. I hope to show you as we take a closer look at the book and we take a greater deep dive into some of the words in the texts that our understanding is expanded, that we'll see stuff that we might have missed if we hadn't looked closer. This Old Testament book really paints a really clear picture of who Jesus was, and this was 700 years before he was even born. There's detailed insights about Jesus in the book of Isaiah that we don't get anywhere else in the Bible, that we can learn things from Isaiah that we don't see in some of the New Testament passages. I'm going to be speaking from Isaiah chapter 42, but I'm going to be focusing on the first 4 verses. There's 25 in total in this chapter, but the reality is I was so struck when I read it, and I read the first 4, I couldn't move past them. Before I start any prep for any sermon, I asked God, what do you want to say to those people who are listening? And he was really clear. He wanted to speak to people today from these verses. I think today there's an opportunity to find freedom in some of the words that were said. As we look to Jesus and we look to this prophecy of him, there's freedom to be found. Later on, there's going to be an opportunity for people to respond to some of the words that I'm going to say today. If you feel challenged or stirred or God's poking or prodding this morning, then there'll be an opportunity to come and get prayer later on this morning. But let's read the text. Here is my servant, whom I uphold, my chosen one in whom I delight. I will put my spirit on him, and he will bring justice to the nations. He will not shout or cry out or raise his voice in the streets. A bruised reed he will not break. A smouldering wick he will not snuff out. In faithfulness he will bring forth justice. He will not falter or be discouraged till he establishes justice on earth. In his teachings the islands will put their hope. Now, Isaiah 42 is the first of 4 pieces of texts in the book of Isaiah that are known as the servant songs. We see here the first one in Isaiah 42, also in Isaiah 49, Isaiah 50, and Isaiah 52. We pick up these passages of scripture that refer to this servant king, this suffering servant. They tell of a servant who experiences a great deal of suffering throughout his life. As the servant songs go on, we see that increasing. But this is where we're first introduced to him in Isaiah 42. And right from the start, we're confronted with what looks like a slightly contradictory description. We see him titled as a servant. That's really clear. We all get that image straight away in our heads. We can understand what that might look like. But as we read on, we see that he's here to bring justice. And for those reading at the time, the bringer of justice was the king. Here we've got a servant doing the job of a king. That just wouldn't have stacked up. And as we read on to the description of how he's going to do it, we see it a little bit more. He will not cry out or raise his voice in the streets. On a number of occasions today, as we look at the English translation of the words, it doesn't quite capture the sense of what we're talking about. And it's why it's important to dig that a little bit deeper. These words, to cry out, means to drown out, to squash, to stamp out any other noise that you might be heard. And we know that this is in the public domain. Talk about doing it in the streets. It's about controlling public discourse. That's a method of a king. Nothing else is going to happen. This is what's happening. This is how I'm going to do it. That controlling idea is not what the servant's going to come and do. That might be what other kings might have done from time to time to control the narrative, but this isn't what this king is coming to do. You see, this servant is going to come and achieve the outcome of the king in terms of bringing justice, but he's going to use the methods of a servant. That's what sets him apart. And because of this, there was, and there still is, a number of people who don't think this verse, this passage of scripture could possibly be talking about the Messiah they were expecting. There was a belief that actually this person was not one individual, but actually it referred to the believing people at the time, the believing community, the Jewish people. I don't believe that's actually the case, and I want to show you that by unpacking other parts of the Bible as we look at it. So we're going to jump forward to the account of Jesus' baptism in Matthew. And we read, as soon as Jesus was baptized, he went up out of the water. At that moment, heaven was opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting on him. And a voice from heaven said, "This is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased." What we have here in this passage is it's quoting 2 texts from the Old Testament. So for those who might not be aware, the Old Testament was written in Hebrew. We have the New Testament that was written in Greek. And this is what we have. We have the Greek translation of a Hebrew text in our English Bibles. So it's really important that we look at what was said in the Hebrew and what was said in the Greek. And that's why I want to encourage you, when you're studying the Word of God, to look at some of this stuff, because it's fascinating. Because this text is so rich, and more will come out of it as you deep dive and you study it a little bit more. And I want to do that today. Because I don't want to brush over or miss some of the weight of this passage by not looking at what the writer originally wanted to say. The first quote is from Psalm 2. "I will proclaim the Lord's decree," he said to me, "You are my son." Familiar. "Today I have become your father." See, Psalm 2 is talking about this great Messiah who's going to smash to pieces like pottery all the kingdoms who might stand against him as he comes to bring his justice. And we see this text, "You are my son." Then Matthew goes on to quote from our passage that we're in today. "Here is my servant whom I uphold, my chosen one in whom I delight. I will put my spirit on him and he will bring justice." The one in whom I delight is the Greek translation of the one I'm well pleased that we see in the Matthew passage. The two are linked together. You know, we see in here as well, the Spirit comes on him in Isaiah. We see that in the Matthew passage as well. I want to put them side by side for you so we can see how these are linked. So I'm going to give you a second just to try and digest that. But in the middle, we've got the passage from Matthew. Then at the bottom, we see here in red, "You are my son. This is my son." That translates, they're linked, that's together. It's referencing back to these texts. Then in the blue, we see the Spirit of God descending like a dove. I will put my Spirit on him. In whom I delight, translated, I am well pleased. You see the parallels of these passages. This voice from heaven at the account of Jesus' baptism is saying, this is the Messiah that the prophets were talking about. He is the great and powerful king that's described in Psalm 2. He's also the suffering servant that's described in Isaiah 42 and the other servant songs. See, Jesus is the focus of this passage, and it is Jesus who can combine both kingly authority with the humility of a servant. He has the ability to combine characteristics not normally found in one single person in order to achieve the purposes that he has for this earth. And what are those purposes? Well, I think the text that we're reading from today is really clear on that. Justice. Jesus is coming to bring justice. It's mentioned 3 times in the first 4 verses. I know the idea of justice is probably familiar to you all. We know the legal system, we know the justice system, the idea that things might need to be put right, the idea that there should be consequences to actions that aren't in step with the natural order of things. When something wrong happens, it must be put right. Anyone name the TV show? Suits. Me and Susie are rewatching this at the moment. There's loads of TV shows written about justice, about law, about order. But the focus of these shows and our common understanding is always about restorative justice or rectifying justice, the idea that you put stuff wrong. And that is the widely understood understanding of the word justice. But I've discovered something new as I've read and studied this passage, that the word in the Hebrew is the word mishpat. Excuse my Hebrew pronunciation. Anyone who does study Hebrew can correct me. But it carries a slightly different meaning. It talks about a different kind of justice. And it's a justice that the commentators call primary justice. It refers to something much bigger than rectifying wrongs. It actually speaks to a society where rectifying justice isn't required at all, where everything is in right relationship with each other. If you live around this area, you might have seen the Chinook helicopters flying around. These things have always fascinated me. See how their blades seemingly intertwine and cross over. Again, I'm not an aviation engineer at all, so I might be murdering this illustration, but isn't it amazing? They seem to cross over, and it's finely tuned piece of engineering that enables that to happen. And any kind of slight tweak out of timing and something really bad is going to happen. This is kind of this idea of things working in unity to create the order. And I want to try and give you another illustration of how this is going to work as well. And I need your help, okay? So this is a part where we're going to move a little bit, and we're going to get re-engaged. And I need Tim, can you come and help me? Believe it or not, the band have a secret instrument that they use to help them keep in time. It's called a click track. Basically, a metronome, click, 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 click. It's what they use, so the drummer and the instruments can all stay in time. I have zero rhythmical ability or timing or anything like that. So this illustration could be tricky. And I had a number of phone calls this week with people who do have rhythm to see if it's even going to work as a concept. So what we're going to do is Tim's going to play the click. And by the wonders of technology, I'm going to put it out front of house. Yep. Can we hear that? We can hear it. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, as a church, together, collectively, we're going to do a beat, okay? And I've made this beat up. Oh, a bit louder. Great. Okay. So I've got to do it in time to start with, and I need you to join me. Okay. So it's really simple. So we're going to go 2 feet and hands. So, okay. Keep that going. I mean, we're already out of time. Okay, reset. Okay, play it again. You've got to keep in time. I'm going to take the click away in a second. You've got to keep in time. But play the click. Keep going. Should we see how we're doing? Oh, we are out of time. We are not in time. Keep going. Disaster. Absolute disaster. Okay, thank you. We'll stop that. I mean, you proved my point before we even took the clicker away. So, which, to be honest, was what Josh said would happen when I asked him about it earlier this week. The click is what's guiding us. It's the thing that's holding everything together. This click is the mishpat. It's like shalom. That's the Greek word for peace. It's synonymous with the word mishpat. It's the thing that keeps order. And when you take that away, or something comes in and changes it or distorts it, then you lose all sense of rhythm or timing. You lose all sense of control of what's going on. Everything was in right relationship with each other. When you've got the click and the band work in harmony, things are going well. But if you look around the world today, I think you'll probably all agree with me that we do not have this kind of sense of peace or shalom, this mishpat. There's no sense that everything is working correctly in order. There's no peace around the world. Oh, I didn't click my slide on. I had a nice slide for that. There we go. See, that might have explained it. And we lost the rhythm. Jesus is coming back, and this is what this passage is talking about, to restore this mishpat, to restore this primary justice, because there was a time when shalom had been established, when the world that has been created all worked in perfect unity and relationship with each other. But it's been lost, and I want to look back a little bit, look back to the Old Testament to see where we might have lost it. Because there was once upon a time, and we see it in the story of Genesis, where God looked at the world after he'd created it, and he said it was good. He said it was really good. God saw all he had made, and indeed it was very good. So things worked. The original creation had this mishpat. It had shalom. Everything worked in right relationship with each other. But shortly after this, in Genesis 3, we see how the story changed. We see the fall of humanity. We see the moment when sin entered the world. You see, Adam and Eve had the freedom of the garden. They had one instruction, not to eat from one tree, but they ignored God. They took the apple and they ate it. And it was at that moment where this primary justice was lost. You know, the most important relationship working together, the one with man and God, had been broken. See, God dwelt with them in the garden. Adam and Eve looked after the creation that God had created. A united and personal relationship that they walked hand in hand, step in step. They did the one thing that he asked them not to do, and that's where we lost mishpat. Things had changed. But the Lord God called the man, "Where are you?" He answered, "I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." And he said, "Who told you you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree I commanded you not to?" See, God's starting to ask some questions. Where are you? They were now trying to hide from the God who used to dwell amongst them. They became self-conscious. God says, "Who told you you were naked? Did you eat from the tree I told you not to do?" See, God knew the answers to the questions, but it was the relationship that had broken. And as we follow the narrative through, we see how, and Adam then answers God and the questions he's asking. We see the breakdown of some more relationships. See, Adam straight away points the finger at Eve, says, "It was her, the woman you gave me. She gave me the apple." The people who only a few verses before were described as one flesh are now divided. This team of man and wife turned against each other. The breakdown of human relationships started here. And we feel the consequence of that today. The causes of so many injustices that you might have felt will be rooted in the division of a human relationship. And that might be political differences, it might be faith-based division. So much hurt in the world is caused by divided people. And this is where it started. You see what Adam did? Pointed a finger. It was self-preservation. It was selfish. It was him not wanting to be the one who did it wrong. Have you ever acted like Adam? I know that I have. Blaming someone else when I've done something wrong. Self-preservation, trying not to save face. We move on to see how another relationship has been broken down as well. Our relationship with the earth that we're living on. Curses the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat the food from it. All the days of your life, it will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you are taken. For you are dust, and to dust you will return. Our relationship with this world has been broken too. Our lives are no longer going to be straightforward. All of creation working in perfect relationship at the start of creation has been lost. Sin entered the world and we lost what God had called good, and now we have to live in the reality of a broken world. See, our relationship with this created world is broken, and I'm sure you feel it. There's things that happen in life that feel like they are just way harder than they should be. We see natural disasters around the world that destroy communities. We see the physical decay of our own bodies until ultimately we end up dying and returning to the dust, as the passages describe. The Bible teaches, and I believe that we can trace all this hurt that we experience as humans back to the breaking of primary justice when we lost that shalom that had been established in the original creation. It all roots back to Genesis. The broken relationships we have, the hurt caused by others, come back to this moment when sin entered the world. And it's a shared experience. I'm sure everybody has felt some kind of pain or injustice against them. But if we're really honest with ourselves, have we ever done something that we wish we hadn't? Have we ever been the cause of someone else's pain? We can strive to be the best versions of ourselves, but we will fall short and we will ultimately get it wrong. Maybe we even had good intentions, but that can still cause other people upset. You know what? I know I've done that. I know I've been the cause of pain in other people's lives. Just because I'm stood here delivering the message, don't for 1 second think that this doesn't count for me as well. Maybe with good intentions, I might try and justify myself, but ultimately, I could have well been the cause of pain in people's lives. But church, I don't want us to be discouraged. I don't want us to be disheartened, because there is good news in this passage that we're reading today. God had a plan to restore this broken world. That's why Jesus came. That's what Isaiah 42 is talking about. One day we will get to experience that mishpat that God originally intended and he had originally established. The future hope of this teaching series is that one day we have that eternity secure, that perfect relationship where everything is functioning as it should will be there. Drew read this passage from Revelation at the end of his talk a few weeks ago, and I want to read it to you again. This is the image of what's to come. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Look, God's dwelling place is now amongst the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God." God's dwelling place will once again be amongst his people. That first relationship between man and God that was broken will be fully restored. Primary justice will be reestablished. And if you're a follower of Jesus today, that is really good news. That is your future. That's what you've got in store. A perfect, united relationship with the one who made you. That's something to be really excited about. That's why we're looking at future hope. That's what I want to encourage you with this morning. But church, if you're struggling today, this idea of future hope and eternity in heaven doesn't help you much right now. And I recognize that. I am excited about what's on that screen, absolutely. But the reality is today, in this room, you might be struggling. And I want to tell you and encourage you again that there is hope for the future, but there is real hope out of this passage for today. A bruised reed he will not break. A smouldering wick he will not snuff out. There's some amazing things that we can see about Jesus from the Old Testament passages, as I've said. And by looking closely at some of these words used to describe him, not only do we see that exciting future, but we see the real tangible hope for today. A bruised reed he will not break. A smouldering wick he will not snuff out. These are the images that Isaiah uses, and I want to look at them a bit closer. Both a bruised reed and a smouldering wick are both fragile in their state, but for two different reasons. Our English word for bruised, it doesn't carry much weight or severity. I bruise all the time. But what Isaiah is talking about, the Hebrew word here is more probably better translated as like crushed. It's this idea of deep muscular pain. Something deep inside that would have been seen as like a lethal blow or a death blow if someone received it. Some impact internally that might not have shown anything externally, but actually you're dying inside. This stalk of grain that's been bent in half like this photo. It's not totally detached, but all wisdom would say that's not going to produce any more grain moving forward. Does anyone here today maybe feel a bit like a broken reed or bruised reed? Have you got something going on that's just killing you internally, that you're really struggling with? You know, the suffering servant can restore you. You will not break under his care. A smouldering wick is slightly different to the bruised reed. Isaiah is talking about the wick in an oil lamp. And if you don't properly look after and maintain a smouldering wick, then it'll be really easy to just get snuffed out and it won't be any use anymore. A lack of air or oil will deprive the embers of its heat and enable it to be the lamp that the house needs it to be. It will never function to the potential if you don't care for it and look after it. And maybe you've got the embers of a relationship with God here today, but there's things that have crept into your life that are trying to distract you, disillusion you, or deceive you. Maybe it is you've become disillusioned with church and the idea of church, and the spark that you once had is slowly starting to fade. Does anyone here feel like a smouldering wick today? Jesus is wanting to restore you. Your light will not go out under his care. You see, my confidence in his restorative power is based on the word of God, and it's based on the life of Jesus. See, Jesus is like no one else. He is able to combine things not usually seen in a single person in order to achieve the purpose that he wants. That's bringing justice, and it's bringing restoration. He will come like a powerful king, and he will bring both rectifying justice and primary justice to this broken world. But he also comes like a humble servant to heal and restore those of you who are broken, those of us who are bruised. He can do that because he's already come, and he's already been broken, and he's already been bruised himself. God is not distant and detached from our struggles. Jesus left all of heaven's glory to be born as a baby and live life as a man. He can empathize. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weakness, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. And not only did he just live a perfect life without sin, he experienced suffering himself. Jesus was betrayed by his closest friends. He was mocked, he was criticized, he was bruised, and he was beaten. 1 Peter 2 tells us this: when they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. He bore our sins in his body on the cross so that we might die to sins and live for righteousness. By his wounds, you have been healed. His resurrection means that your struggles and that your hurts can be dealt with forever. They can be dealt with today. And it's here that we find hope for today. That today, through the power of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, by his wounds, you can be healed. That is good news. That is hope for today. We have an eternity secure because of his death and resurrection. We have present hope because by his wounds, we can be healed. He takes our pain, he takes our struggle, says, I've been there. I know, I understand, I can empathize, and I draw near to you, and I come humbly like a servant to draw near to you, to care for you, to heal you. Jesus took the rectifying justice that this world required because of our sinfulness so he could restore creation to a position of the primary justice. He took our punishment and he took our bruises in order that when he comes, he can deal with us in a humble and caring way. Jesus got the outcome of the king with the methods of a servant. Can I ask the band to join me on stage? Do we see that because he was wounded, he doesn't have to, and he took our punishment, he doesn't have to deal with our mess. He can say, I'll take that on me. It's just so remarkable about Jesus. We're going to sing a song now, and then we're going to have an opportunity to respond to some of this stuff. And it talks about the character of Jesus Christ. You know, in Jesus, there's freedom. We want to help you today find freedom. If you're carrying hurt and tenderness, if you've experienced loss or trauma, this morning, Jesus can restore you. I've really felt the burden of this as I read the passages months ago when I was given it, that there'll be people in the room who are carrying hurt. I also feel there's people in the room who might have caused hurt. And God is going to come and meet you where you're at today. Church, there's beauty to be had in Jesus Christ. There's real goodness to be seen. And there's redemption to be experienced. The restorative power of Jesus is available for you today. As we sing these songs, you might know it, you might want to sing along. Maybe you just want to listen to them because they declare more truth of who he is. But this is the person who we're talking about. The suffering servant. Who is he? His name is Jesus, and he's here. And he is wanting to move. And he is wanting to heal. And he is wanting to restore.
Hi guys, don't click away just yet. I wanted to say thank you so much to you for watching our video, and whether this is your first time watching or your 100th time, you are so welcome here. My name is Sarah and I am on the staff team here at the Beacon Church. As a church, we exist to help people know God, find freedom, discover their purpose and make a difference. If you wanted to find out more, then please do watch the rest of the content on our channel, or you can click on the links below to follow our social media and our website, where you can also find information about how to support us financially. And of course, finally, don't forget to like and subscribe and share with a friend, not for our benefit, but for yours. And thank you so much for your time. God bless.